Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Please join me in Gasho. Namo Amidabutsu, Namo Amidabutsu, Namo Amidabutsu, Namandaps, Namandaps, Namandaps. Well, I'm glad you guys could join us this morning. So just to catch everybody up a little bit. So I've been really busy lately. I've been helping my mom move out of her house. A lot of you guys can picture her house. It's a really big house, right? Well, she's actually begun the process of moving out of it, which is quite the tall task, let me tell you, right? My mom's not a hoarder or anything like that, but she has like multiple generations of things in her house. And as a result, because she's downsizing, we've been forced to ask a lot of difficult questions in terms like what we do with all of said items. And so she's been like giving a lot of things away and that kind of stuff. And also we've been trying to determine like what is the stuff that we're going to take with us and carry with us into the new house, right? So there's a bunch of cool stuff. So the benefit for me is that she's actually given me a lot of like old items, which I think are kind of cool, right? Like here's one item, like this is my grandfather's old combat helmet that he like wore in Burma. And he also, of course, like took with him to Japan. So that's a really cool item that I'm holding on to at the moment. Another interesting item that she gave me, a little different, was this is an unopened Whoopi Goldberg Star Trek The Next Generation figure that my father bought for me when I was very small, thinking that it would be very valuable one day if it was never opened. And it is actually worth less today than it was when it was purchased. So you don't really get to win them all, unfortunately. But anyway, regardless of what the items are that are kind of being circulated out of the house, like decluttering is really difficult, is what we're deciding. I admit that like we're kind of operating a little bit under the Marie Kondo method, which I'm sure you guys have seen, but it's not as easy as what you typically watch on Netflix, right? Like that's easy when you're just watching the show, but going through it's way more difficult. Like the Marie Kondo method asks you to break things into categories, and you have like really disposable, ephemeral things like, books and magazines or DVDs. And then there's like clothes and a bunch of other stuff. But eventually you find yourself dealing with a thing called sentimental items. And that's where everything kind of falls apart. It gets really difficult, right? My mom is especially tricky when it comes to sentimental items because she has a lot of them. And my mother is very sentimental about everything. And she has this ability to go through her entire house. It's very impressive. And like point to any like miscellaneous item like that or that. And she can tell you the story about that item and where it came from and why it's important. And this can be done for any item within the house, basically. Who gave it to her? What the story is behind it? Why it's valuable or important? So again, we've been going through this process over and over and over again, right? Like she can say like, oh, I picked this up at this person's wedding or when I was on this trip, and like tells me the story about like her experiences with my dad or my grandfather, or just talking about like what it was like when she was in college. Again, I tell you, there's an item for everything and a memory associated to everything you could possibly imagine, right? Sometimes I like to make her a little bit angry. Like I'll just take a box like arbitrarily around the house and I'll just like start throwing things in the box and I'd be like, this is garbage. And then she'll get really upset and freak out and be like, no, like follow me around and I'll have to like take it out. And part of me is being serious because we do need to downsize, obviously, the amount of stuff that's in the house at any point in time. But then like I'll have her explain like, why is this valuable? And then she'll say something like, well, it was a gift from someone. And I'll be like, that doesn't matter. And one of the greatest responses that she had to the whole thing was like, well, it was a gift from me. And if someone took the time to buy me something, it means they took the time to think about me. And that is meaningful. And I said, it's a really good response. And so we took the item with us. It's probably a doll. Everything is a doll. But, as good as a response that was, and I agree with what she was saying right there, the truth of the matter is that, like, it kind of begs at this bigger issue, right? Like, what is it that we need to take with us? And more, I think it kind of begs itself to, like, a bigger question in general. Like, what are we already taking with us? What are we carrying with us? The truth of it is that decluttering is not really just the end all be all, right? Decluttering is actually a way for us to really get at that bigger question. Like, what are we carrying with us all the time? And why are we carrying it? And what's really important for us to take with us all the time? So some forms of Zen Buddhism actually regard the act of cleaning and decluttering to be part of a teaching, the teaching of minimalism, like living a life of simplicity that is steeped in conscious, mindful practice. And it's the act of mindfully learning to let go of our old selves, right? This person that we used to be and the circumstances of our old life, all of those hopes and dreams that defined who we are, that sometimes we cling to. Again, some forms of Zen Buddhism ask us to mindfully go through the process of cleaning out our homes and minimizing things so that we can learn to just let go of the past. It's a beautiful thought, right? But in Jodo Shinshu, we know that that's way harder than it seems. That's not an easy task for anybody. And so it's not easy. I mean, decluttering isn't easy. Moving, especially, is not easy. And I think that moving is a good example of how hard it is to let go of the past. And I guess the other bigger issue is how difficult it is to move into the future, right? Because the future is very scary and it's very uncertain. I mean, when we move, the initial inclination is like to take everything with us, right? Getting rid of all of our old items is very difficult because when we come to those items, you can make up any number of reasons why you should keep them. And some of them are better than others, but I mean, you might convince yourself that they're valuable, even though they might just be junk, right? Or you could convince yourself that there's something that you want to hand down to future generations that have like some sort of like traditional value, something that, defines the generations. Or maybe you can talk about how there's a bunch of memories or experiences attached to those things. And it's hard to argue with that, right? Because again, you've lived your life and these items are kind of like symbols of the different things that you've done throughout your life and the people that have come and gone. And as time goes on, that's where it really gets tricky, right? Because as you move through life, all these items become more tied to people. It's like my mom was talking about, right? The person that gave that to you and thought of you in that moment. Or, the person you were like when you received it or purchased it, the experiences tied to it. That person that might not even be there anymore, the old you, right? The causes and conditions that allowed you to be in that moment or to be tied to all those people around you. Sometimes it feels like when we're throwing something away, when we're getting rid of something, it's almost like you're throwing away a part of yourself, right? Who you used to be. Or, even more difficult, more troublesome, like letting go of the people that you loved. I mean, they're just things ultimately, right? But there's that worry about forgetting. You don't want to forget. I carry that. I understand that. But, clinging to all of the old items isn't the same as forgetting, remembering all the people that we loved and cared about. Clinging to all your old items is almost like the equivalency of living in a museum, right? It's this idea of, it's comforting and it reminds you of stuff, kind of. But it doesn't really help you live. And in a lot of ways, it doesn't help prepare you for the world that's constantly changing, that's constantly moving forward, that's constantly in this process of pressing into something new all the time, whether you like it or not, right? I mean, that's the world. That's just how it is. And, the memories of who we are and the teachings of the people that we loved, that's really the important thing. Not the item, but it's the other stuff that's associated with them. And the truth of the matter is you don't need the items for that. You've already got that with you, right? That is already part of who you are, and that's something that you should carry on. When we clean out our homes and we go through all of our old stuff, we take inventory of how our life has changed over a period of time. We reflect on we reflect on the lessons that we've learned, the people that we've loved. We contemplate how those teachings and those experiences, those memories guide us even today. And from that, there's a real sense of lasting gratitude that emerges, right? You're happy and grateful just for knowing these people and being in those experiences when you go through it with that kind of mental thinking, right? And then you can realize that all of these items, they're really just kind of like steps. They're just like markers along the way. And they don't really mean anything by themselves, right? It's the lessons and the memories you take from them that matter. And you know what? The nice thing is that those really aren't going anywhere. Those are still part of you, right? Everything else is just an item. It's just stuff. And you can be okay you'll be okay if you put it down, if you don't let it weigh you down over the long run. The memories, they're here. The lessons that people taught you, they're in here. And you should let those continue to guide you as you move forward into the future, as you continue to live your life under the teachings and guidance of those that came before you, the very people that you're afraid of letting go. Our past selves, our loved ones are still with us, very much so. And they don't weigh a thing, right? They're not a helmet. They're not a figurine. They exist as memory. They exist as teaching. They exist as a moment in time that continues to guide our actions, and it will until our very last breath. And while the future is scary, and make no mistake, the future is very scary, and the future is very uncertain. But it always is, right? And what better guides could we ask for than the very people that we care about and love? And of course, the Buddha, to guide us along the way, to take us by the hand and to teach us every moment that he can. And I think that's the important thing that we take with us as we go along our journey. Thank you very much for listening. Please join me in Gasho. Gabits. Namo Amidabits. Namandabs. Namandabs. Namandabs.